Hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. We're so excited to have another series of our Your Voice Matters CARE Coaches Against Racism and Exclusion event. We are going to give it a minute or so before we start, so we allow people to get on the line, but just wanted to welcome you to today's event. All right, welcome, welcome. We're going to get started here in just a moment. I see we have Milka on the line. Welcome. We're going to get going here momentarily. Okay. All right, so we are a few minutes after, so let's go ahead and get started. I see folks are joining the line, so for those of you who are on with us, we'd love to hear where you're from. So if you don't mind putting in the chat, like Vicky. Hey, Vicky from Detroit. Thank you for joining us today. Anyone else out there, we'd love to hear where you're from. So welcome to another edition of Your Voice Matters. This is our summer coaching series for Black professionals. We are a collective of coaches known as CARE, which stands for Coaches Against Racism and Exclusion. And the Your Voice Matters series is a virtual series that aims to support the professional development of Black professionals and allies, as well as the DEI experts who are committed to ending racism in their organizations. And so I see a few more folks joining us. Hi from Miami. Welcome, Lorraine from Philly. So settle in. I am thrilled that we have Makeda Brown today. She is going to be talking to us about tossing the cape. So she's going to give us a really special talk around Black women tossing the cape and how we can reimagine self-sacrifice. So Makeda has a fantastic coaching and consulting business called PBR Coaching and Consulting, where she is the owner and principal consultant. Makeda focuses on talent optimization and leadership development in organizations. She also makes sure to have an eye on DEI. So she's working with clients. She's looking to make sure that she's infusing diversity, equality, and inclusion throughout the employment life cycle. Prior to starting her own practice, Makeda has had 20 years of corporate experience. And in the time that I've known Makeda, I continue to be impressed by her brilliance and her warmth. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Makeda Brown.
Thank you, Regina, and welcome everybody. We are so happy to share space with you today. Sounds like we have people from all over the world. So I'm hailing from the Philadelphia area myself, and I would be remiss if I did not acknowledge my Caribbean heritage. So someone born here as a Yankee, but my whole family is from Jamaica. So happy to bring some of that little unique experience into our discussion as well. As Regina mentioned, our topic is really focusing on Black women and our ability to toss the cape. We recognize that in today's world, there's a lot that we sacrifice as individuals, but I would say uniquely for Black women, there's a history that comes with that, and even a bit of a one-dimensional view that sometimes is proliferated in pop culture and other traditions that we face in the US. But also I would say in other countries, you may see a similar phenomenon. I want to invite those of you who are Black women professionals to really take an opportunity to share. We'll have some moments to have you engage. But I also want to recognize that the topic we're talking about today is important for individuals outside of the US. So if you are someone who identifies as a Black, Indigenous person of color, woman of color, we know that some of the topics we're talking about today will be relevant to you. And those who are allies, who are supporting Black professionals in the workplace, in your communities, in society at large, we know that you have a voice in this as well. And so we hope you will enjoy today's discussion as we talk a little bit more about self-sacrifice. I do think it's a topic that resonates for many, but in particular, those who are Black women. So as we talk about Black women, it's interesting, we talk about the cape, and I thought it was fitting, this picture of a Black woman with a cape, almost a superhero, superhuman persona. It's a title that we acknowledge really is a concept that permeates when we talk about Black women being strong. There's often references of our strength, because of the history that we've faced in many portions of our life. It's one of a history that speaks to where women of color have had to survive racism and sexism at the same time, while playing significant roles in their own journeys, as well as those that they support. So this myth, in terms of a superhuman strength, being analogous with the essence of a Black woman, is often a stigma that we carry and plays a role in how we show up. So this feeling that we must be strong for ourselves and others often materializes in our putting ourselves behind, so sacrificing our own individual needs to be able to serve that. And often it plays into the emotions that we have to navigate in being human and being a contributor to the world. Another piece I'll mention just from a historical standpoint is that during times of female empowerment, it's interesting that the persona of being a superhero was one that also was attributed to Black women, because we were often playing many roles. And we'll talk a little bit more about that as I shift to what self-sacrifice really means. So I'll reference a quote from Dr. Inger Burnett Ziegler. She's a clinical psychologist, and in an article in the New York Times, she described this phenomenon of being a strong Black woman as follows: a cultural icon born of Black women's resilience in the face of systemic oppression that has dismantled families and made economic stability a formidable challenge. She is self-sufficient and self-sacrificing. She is a provider, a caretaker, a homemaker, and often she is suffering. So you'll notice we talk about that strength being one that can be supportive, right? It's almost admirable. It's where many Black women get their ambition from, why we are able to support others. We have this drive to succeed, but often we're doing that with limited resources, which again shows our tenacity and our ability to really strive and thrive in many situations. But when we look at the obligations that we're carrying as part of that, it's often how we're helping others as a provider, as a caretaker, not only for our direct family unit, but often our extended family when we think about elderly parents, relatives that we may be partnering with to kind of keep our whole village going. As part of that village, it's often where we show up in the workplace as well, in where we give much and significantly to the workplace and in support and in partnership with our coworkers. And then lastly, in keeping a home, whether that be as an individual. And I mentioned these roles because I don't think it's a short list, but in many of the Black women that I know in my life, they have so many hats, they're playing so many roles. So there probably is more that you might be thinking of as we touch on these points. We also recognize that with that self-sacrifice, there is difficulty. So difficulty in asking for help. Sometimes that has impacts on us that are unforeseen. And I did have an opportunity to reference some of the work of Yiji Wang, where she is an assistant professor at Michigan State University. She took advantage of some research and really looking at Black women who use the Superwoman persona to cope with stress, particularly the stress that comes with discrimination. So her study looked at how Black women experience racial discrimination in different contexts, specifically employment, in the educational academia environment, and many other settings. So the researchers that she played a role in driving this study, they found that when faced with high levels of racial discrimination, some aspects of the Superwoman persona, such as the feeling or need to be strong, that requirement to be strong, and the need to suppress one's emotions, sometimes it serves us. So it serves us in our ability to self-protect, to survive. And they found in the study that there was a health protection in that. It was an opportunity in that strength to reduce the negative health impacts of chronic racial discrimination that may be faced day to day, both at work and potentially in society. At the same time, however, although it's a benefit, we see the other side of the coin comes through as well. At the same time, Black women may be facing the facets of this persona. They are finding that intense drive to succeed, the feeling of obligation to others. It seems to sometimes exasperate other health effects, such as cardiovascular disease, that we know is very much a common disease area for women and Black women, diabetes as well. These chronic conditions and many others are often examples of the stress that comes from holding up that ideal of being that strong Black woman or the Superwoman persona. The suppression of emotion often comes up as well. And I would like to take a moment now, and Regina, I know we're going to take a look at our comments, but we'd like to invite those of you listening live with us to share in the comments, in the chat, what are some of the things that come to mind when you think of the sacrifices you're making, right? What is a thought or feeling that comes up? We'll give it a moment just so we can capture some of your thoughts, and Regina and I will have a dialogue about that.
Yeah, so, for me, Makeda, it is exhausting. I remember early on in my career, I quite often sacrificed myself. I wanted to get ahead. I was very ambitious, but at the same time, I was a young wife, a young mother. I had obligations to my family, both my immediate and then extended family, as you mentioned. But I felt that I had to prove myself to get ahead. So I would take on all of these assignments.
Sure.
And so I'm seeing that your question, Makeda, is resonating with folks. We have, a lot of folks are saying exhaustion, feeling used. Definitely resonate with that, Milka. Vicky says sadness, which I definitely relate to that. We have lonely, and Lorraine makes a great point that it can sometimes become resentful.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And we have a few other great comments. around feeling disposable. Elizabeth, what a great input. Feeling as if you're disposable and demanding also came up. So what a variety of emotions.
Sure. And, often the words that we use to describe how we feel are reflective of thoughts that we have, right? The thought of, I must be strong, right? I have to carry through. I need to survive, not for me, but for those that I support and I love. It's interesting, Regina, as you were talking about just, over the course of life and even career, I have an early memory. My mom became a single mom at a point in our life, or in my childhood, taking care of me and my brother. And I remember I used to sneak to pay a bill here and there when I was starting to work in high school, right? And I remember she pulled me aside and said I shouldn't be doing that, but it's something that carried with me in terms of I needed to not only take care of myself in terms of being self-sufficient, but I always needed to be in a place where I could support my family. And it was almost a recognition of the sacrifice that my mother made, right? I needed to do that for her, for my brother. And I expanded the list without even being asked. So I say all this to everyone who's listening, that these feelings are real. I want to acknowledge that it's perfectly normal, right? That being able to balance both responsibility, ambition, wanting to do well in what you're doing in life. And these emotions often carry some remnants of thoughts that you're managing in terms of your own place in the world, your purpose, your worth sometimes comes into question. And really just knowing, are you being you, right? So we sometimes put ourselves behind in that respect.
Absolutely.
So for contributing. Anything else that comes in the chat?
A couple more. Adrian says, not making myself a priority, which is so true. That often happens, right? As we are prioritizing everything but care for ourselves. And then anger came in as well, which I think the resentment, if left to brew, definitely can turn into anger at at others, but also at yourself. I know.
For sure. And I think that's a great lead into what I wanted to share in terms of what are we sacrificing, right? So when those emotions come up, particularly those that we direct at ourselves, right? When we hold up the mirror and we might be rather critical, but also in terms of maybe not doing enough, that comes up as well. So let's take a look at what we're sacrificing. These are some of the top 5 areas that often come up in terms of what women are sacrificing in order to really remain strong and to hold that ideal. Some areas that we see of significant impact are relationships. So I'll use some examples as I talk through these. So from a relationship standpoint, that's often where we're sacrificing time from our loved ones, time from friendships, time in terms of the relationships we have with our partner, with our spouse. There's that piece that often comes up in our effort to be strong and to kind of put ourselves second. We're doing as much as we can, but maybe still not finding that we're able to balance that. And that's primarily, again, when we're starting to think about the intersection with career, right? That impact to relationships definitely comes up. With children, another area that many women comment on as a challenge. Are we finding that we're experiencing less time with our children? And I know that's a little weird, even in this time where many of us are working from home, but I have to acknowledge so many of us are still essential in their roles, and they've not had the privilege, and I do recognize it as a privilege to work from home. But even if you're juggling both in your remote environment, wherever you might be, you're on the computer. Right? You are trying to get the most out of maybe a few hours that you have before bedtime. You may also be concerned about your own parenting, right? Maybe there's a quality of parenting that you espouse to, and just the fact that time becomes a competing element for that as well. Missing things. I know pre-pandemic, many of my peers have talked about having to run from this sport event or that theater or recital, various things that your children are involved in, and how can you both be there at work and then also show up well for your family?
Yeah, and
Yeah, sorry.
one of the no, I was gonna say one of the comments in here around, people are working more than ever, so that definitely resonates, Makeda, what you're saying, that we're working and missing out on life. So very, very real.
For sure. The other area of sacrifice, our personal well-being, right? Having those moments to center, having our the moments to really address our both our physical and emotional well-being, whether that's in our health habits, our exercise, just other ways in which we attempt to manage stress, taking time for leisure, right? We sometimes lose that. You mentioned, Regina, kind of, when you are earlier in your career, even when you may not have had a family yet, you might have already seen that you were sacrificing personal time, not taking that vacation. I recall years that I lost vacation time. Crazy, but I did.
Yes, it happens.
You're putting so much of everyone's needs, the business needs, the company's needs, the areas that you are contributing in the community, maybe a role that you play in your church, things like that. These are areas where, again, we are finding that we constantly put ourselves behind. And in the sacrifice area, we've seen impact from a financial standpoint. So at times we're not able to take that opportunity that might give us more of a financial footing to support our dreams and our goals. And that might be because we're balancing the support for others. It might be a particular cause that we're thinking through, but it gets in the way. I know myself, I've left jobs to, or not taken jobs, but I know folks who have left jobs just to be able to kind of continue to support or provide in a different way, and again, remaining strong. And lastly, from a career standpoint, we see sacrifices that come up relative to where we're located, right? We can't relocate for that global opportunity or that opportunity in another region. Travel, right? A lot of requirements in terms of being on the road. Not so much now, but there was a time where we would have to make that trade-off. Can I actually continue in this role if I'm not able to travel to the degree that was required? And I know I mentioned earlier, we have many of our allies on the call, individuals who are managers of Black women. I'm going to behoove you as you think about career impacts. What are some of the paradigms that we can start shifting? We know we've learned them in this post-pandemic timeframe. What can we continue to maintain and really challenge? Is that really a requirement, and how realistic is it when we think about the sacrifice that individuals need to make to maintain those jobs? So I say that to say companies should be seeking ways to ensure, if they really are serious about retaining top Black female talent, we need to be understanding and be aware of these sacrifices and identify programs, support, and otherwise that can help in balancing and hopefully taking off the need to be so strong, right? Be a part of the community in providing support and solutions to help our Black women manage their careers.
Yeah, I love that, Makeda. And there's a wonderful comment in the chat from Angela around loving yourself before loving others.
Sure.
That the adage that you need to put your oxygen mask on first before you help others, which I think is such a powerful analogy. I love that analogy because it really does reinforce what you're saying, that we have to take care of ourselves. We can't continue to sacrifice ourselves and our well-being.
Sure. And I think that comment is spot on in terms of our own consciousness, right? So how aware are we of how we are managing to the real world versus the ideal? Where does it come from, right? I mentioned history often has been a source of that, but I don't know that that's always what comes to mind, right? I don't think when I'm sacrificing too much of myself that I'm necessarily thinking about years ago and the many wonderful Black women that have come before me. I recognize I'm on their shoulders, but in the moment, I'm just looking to help, right? So the thing is, where does that ideal come from? Sometimes it might be in what you've seen in your own upbringing, examples of women that have had to go it alone. As you look at that and you think about what you're doing for yourself, might you be adopting a thought or a set of beliefs that are real but may not be your situation? How could you challenge that? Thinking about what you really want, right? So often we think about what others need. Have you taken a moment in putting on that oxygen mask to identify? And I like to journal. I like to jot things down in moments of reflection to really say, here's what I need. Here's what I want. If I'm looking, if I want to, if my thought in terms of a concern or fear might be that I'm not strong enough, it might be that I have a clear thought that I want to be powerful. I want to be able to sustain myself. Those are excellent things to be aware of. So taking stock of those is important. The how you get there, I think, is what we can start to reimagine and challenge, right? So consider in wanting to be strong, as an example, do you know what you're doing to get there, right? So writing down what that looks like, right? I sometimes even categorize the time I'm spending. So have I, if I'm finding I'm noticing I'm losing sleep, and hopefully I notice, or my friends remind me, I'm happy to have folks that are good reflections in the mirror for me, but taking time to consider what you're doing to get what you want, and is it serving you? And I always like to ask what I think is a powerful question. What is it costing you? So in supporting everyone, what are the things that you're not tending to that are on your list of needs and desires? And starting to acknowledge that, I think, is a great step forward. But then taking action to say, how might I start to shift that ratio or to rebalance, right? So if this is all that I'm doing for everyone, is there one thing that I could start to do that gets at something that I'm losing or it's costing me because I'm serving everyone?
Yeah, Makeda, just to chime in there, I think particularly for Black women, a lot of times what we start to see but often ignore is the toll it's taking on our body. I know for me, in trying to do everything and be everything to everyone in my career and at home, I started to get really sick. Not only was I overweight, so it was definitely showing up there, but I was having all kinds of health issues that I would just take a Tylenol or take a, just try to ignore it, live through the pain, having headaches and everything else. So I love your coaching question to ask ourselves, what is it costing us? And for us to really pay attention to how that sacrifice is showing up in our bodies.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I thinking about your body, that resonates with me. I remember for a long time when I was in corporate, at the end of every week, I was so exhausted that the most I could do on a weekend is be on the couch. Initially, I thought, oh, how great. I am taking naps as an adult, all the time in college. Look at me. I can still take a nap anytime I want to. But it was a sign that I was ignoring, that I didn't have the mental energy or the physical energy to do anything else but to kind of collapse on the weekends. And it did get to a point, it was impacting relationships for me in terms of I just wouldn't even gather the time to go for a coffee or to support others in that way. So excellent point in terms of recognizing those signs. And I know for each individual, it may be different. It may come out in other ways, but taking the time to really say, is this the experience I want, right? Have I adopted something that has just continued to potentially me not acknowledging the emotions, not acknowledging that I may be suffering in that respect? So absolutely.
Yeah. And Makeda, your sharing your story is really resonating. Folks are saying yes, and and the couch. Like, I think a lot of us can relate to that, passing out at the end of the weekend.
Absolutely.
And there's also some great comments around how allies can show up. If you are an ally, making making sure that you're supporting and asking how people want to be supported, and just a lot of encouragement for for us to all take care of ourselves first. So
Absolutely. Yeah. So I mentioned that you'll notice the last bullet here talks about exploring other ways to get to what you're looking for. Again, doesn't mean that you can't support others, but making sure that, again, you prioritize yourself as well is important. And that might require a variety of different ways. Simple things, just taking that minute to breathe, right, as a step one. How do you begin to reframe your time? Now, I know we can get into a little bit of a rhythm to say, well, I always pass out every weekend, which I can say I do, right? But what might I do to re-energize myself in a different way? And considering doing that during the week, not always on the weekend. What can I steal away during the day to help myself? And in helping yourself, it will help you actually support others, right? You have to be supportive in yourself to then be able to support others. Yeah. So what I'd like to do is to remind you that the how in which we can toss our cape really starts by looking at the healthy ways that we can sacrifice, right? Not all sacrifices need to result in impacts that might be harmful to ourselves. So I thought this quote from Dr. Robert Holden, he was featured on one of Oprah Winfrey's life classes. He talks about healthy sacrifices, really acknowledging, again, when you start to look at the list of what it's costing you, are there things that you can do differently to still support yourself or actively support yourself? Doesn't mean that you don't support others, but looking at those boundaries that will help you to really work on, to acknowledge what's not working for you and where can you embrace the things that do. So know why you are sacrificing. Understand what those things might be. Is it a limiting belief? Is it a fear that's coming up? We sometimes talk about the scary gremlin, like something that we really has almost become a monster that has gotten us to a point of showing up as a superhero to be able to combat that. So knowing yourself, I think, is a key action that we can all take in terms of being able to toss the cape. Find balance in what you give and create equity for yourself. So there's a concept around, we often say, well, I give 100% of myself to everyone. What I'm asking of you here in contemplating this action is to remember to give yourself a piece of the pie. Start establishing what that is. It might start with 5%, right? You're able to carve out 5% of what you give to yourself and go back to that list of what are the things that you're sacrificing, and pick something in there that you can start giving your time to, right? Create that equity for yourself in being able to set boundaries that might help you to not, again, lose your own self in that respect. And this is where, as you mentioned, Regina, I really invite our allies to play a role, right? Many of you, and again, I'm going to talk about the experiences in corporate America. We have an opportunity to really create equity, whether it's in pay, whether it's in access to resources, supportive groups, employee assistance programs, reminding our particularly managers of Black women, leaders of Black women, to be tapping into those resources. I'm saying things that are not unique to Black women. I think all employees appreciate that, but it does require, again, empathetically looking towards action that will help to avoid, help in terms of being able to combat so often a self-imposed sacrifice mindset that will allow us to show up differently. But we need to know the help is there and that it will be there and there won't be consequences for seeking that help, right? I can recall projects I've been assigned to and, I went it alone. I would have appreciated a manager or two to say, nope, I'm going to give you 2 resources. You shouldn't have to work again to do that. You shouldn't have to work the nights. Now, to be fair, there's a bullet here that also says we need to make the habit of expressing our needs. So another way to give yourself a piece of the pie, take a moment before you tackle something, pause and understand what's really needed to get that done, to support that person, to support the cause, right? Can you do it alone? And I challenge you to take the 8 hours and break it up and say, is it even humanly possible? Right? If you find that your days are more fitting 36 hours into a 24-hour period and not necessarily recognizing that that needs to include sleep, it means, again, that you need to be thinking about that, and don't be alone in those discussions around what you might need. It's great to have mentors and sponsors even help you see that there might be other ways to still focus on your ambition, still get an opportunity to work and contribute, but that doesn't mean going it alone. I sometimes think about that in my own home life. There are things I've chosen to outsource, partly because I'm not good at it. But outsourcing is a option that we hear in a business environment. But think about that in your own life. When you think about the many areas where you play a hat of supporting others, how might you consider inviting others to partner with you, inviting others for help? As the bullet says, engaging others for help. Recognize that's not only so that you can give yourself time, right, and that you're not sacrificing your whole self, but how there is a gift in that too for the people who actually care about you. They want to be playing this role. So we shouldn't be kind of closing the door or locking them out in terms of being able to do that. And often they're at the ready. It's because of what you have given already. And so keep an open mind to recognizing that people do want to reciprocate the many things that you've been able to bring to their lives and doing the same for you. Okay.
That's great. So Makeda, I want to toss in a couple other comments. So we have a comment that I absolutely love by Angela. So I'm going to read it verbatim because she brought it with this. So she says, the cape should be polished, cleaned, and used as needed. Black women must stop raising Black girls to believe we must be strong all the time. Even God rested on the seventh day.
Absolutely.
Amen to that.
Absolutely. It's an excellent point, right? It's so, we can get caught up in that. And again, I know I wear my cape proudly when I do wear it, but absolutely, if it's torn, if it's broken, support me, right? So being vulnerable, that point is an excellent one. Thank you for your comment, because it's okay to be vulnerable. And we know vulnerability is a sign of strength, right? It's our acknowledgement and awareness of what our needs are. And it's balancing. Again, it's not saying that we don't have an opportunity to support others, but we're realistic and not living to an ideal that's impossible. As far as I know, I have not yet been able to fly with my cape. And so at that point, it's definitely recognizing, again, the reality of keeping your feet grounded and helping to support yourself.
Yeah, and to that end, Makeda, I wonder your thoughts on, there's a couple of comments in here around redefining what strength means, or that trope around the strong Black woman, and we have to do it all, be all, get the bag, do this, do that. So, your thoughts on that, how we can redefine what strength looks like for us.
Yeah, so I think number one, it's individual, as you said, it's what it means to you. But I do think from a societal standpoint, we have to watch our words, right? I won't use the full term, but some of you know, many people say, well, I'm a boss X. I'm not going to fill in the blank. And it means that I do everything and I take everything and everything looks nice and pretty and perfect. Well, is that real, right? To question that, is that something you can sustain? We're not saying that that's not a supportive comment, but let's also acknowledge where that could be harmful for those that are trying to get through, right, to survive. And if anything, I think during this time, kind of post-COVID, and actually we're not post-COVID, we're still in COVID-19 and trying to navigate that, we are recognizing, again, we might not be able to do it all, but honoring the things that are most basic in what is required and those things that you value the most, you might come down to a more reasonable list of what you need to do to carry yourself to still be strong, but not necessarily being strong doesn't mean doing 100 things. So I think we owe it to ourselves as a community to watch that language, right? To watch those expectations and to really hopefully see each other from a humanity standpoint and be empathetic to what we can actually carry day to day.
Yes, and Vicky calls out that sometimes we diminish others when we take it all on. So to your point, Makeda, there's we need to be mindful of how we're showing up and perpetuating that myth.
Yeah, and it's a great point. As I listened to that comment, the thing that came to mind, my own personality, I'm very type A. I have this tendency, and I recognize it's a bias. I'm working on it. If I don't necessarily work with people who show up in the same way, I'm like, hey, what's going on? What slack in here? Like, what's this break you're taking? And I have to recognize, again, that's a story I'm telling myself. It's not usually true. And often, sometimes when I learn more or seek to understand, I understand why people are taking have different styles, right? And in that respect, again, not imposing that expectation on others is important. I know there are many Black women on the line listening and hopefully going to be listening to the recording as well. You're managers of others. So how are you setting that tone in leading your team? How do you bring people together to help one another and creating a community of support in the groups that you lead? It's very important that we do that. We know more than ever we have to give space for both the mental recuperation and the physical recuperation that we're going through. So I always remind ourselves to kind of also be careful of those expectations we set.
Oh, so true. You're speaking truth, Makeda. I'm a fellow type A, need to bring it down a couple notches. So
absolutely. So thank you for everyone. We're going to invite you again just to add a comment. So we've offered a few thoughts on, what's going through our head. What are the things we're sacrificing? How do we begin to make healthier choices and give time for ourselves? I'd love to hear from you in the chat. Regina and I would love to hear your thoughts on what's one action you might take today as you contemplate tossing the cape. That might be in your own self. What are you doing? But for those of you, again, that are allies, what's something that you could partner with Black women to do to help them be strong, but in a way that's more realistic and not kind of continuing the stigma of the superhero? So we'll give it a second to come in.
Yes. And, what comes to mind for me, Makeda, is one of the things that I've been working on very consciously the last couple of years is knowing when good enough is enough. So in the work that I do, I have always prided myself in the story I always told myself is that I give 110%. But to your point, if I'm giving away my whole pie and then some, what's left for me. So I now try to say, is 80% good enough, especially when it's something that other people can help me with, or it's just a regular work project. It doesn't always have to be, 110%. So that's one of the things that I'm trying to do is measure.
No, absolutely. Yeah, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, your comments are starting to roll in. And so folks are saying, viewing this. So Milka says viewing this was a healthy choice. So that was the start of
taking 1 hour, right? 1 hour a day, 1 hour a week for yourself. Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes. And, Milka with the K is saying being clear about boundaries with others. That is so important, right? Boundary setting. Sure. We have other really great comments about learning to see the wisdom in selfishness. Wow. Great comment there. Remembering to give back. which is great. In
Giving
addition
back
to
to
giving back.
others and to yourself is how I just expand on that. Absolutely.
Yes, 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 yes. And lots of great comments, Makeda. Perfectionism is a losing strategy. Yes, it is. Um, and you have comments in here around team effort. Teamwork makes the dream work, as they say. And
Absolutely.
then Lorraine brings up a really interesting concept around psychological safety, and making sure that there's an environment for people to be vulnerable. If the environment is psychologically safe, then people can feel like they can toss their cape.
Yeah,
But
I
I'd love to get your
love
thoughts, Makeda.
Yeah, I love that comment. Again, I think in those of us, again, that are in leadership roles where we play a role in shaping our culture, the culture for the organization, the culture of the teams and the work that we're doing, we absolutely need to be mindful of psychological safety. I also acknowledge that in our own efforts to put our interests first, we do need to assess if we, as we step into new opportunities, is it going to be psychologically safe? I know so many people are in this moment of time for our world where we are reflecting on what really matters. They're starting to contemplate what they might be doing next in their career, which might be different than where they are now. If you are in that position, ask yourself that question in the interview process and what you've learned about this new company. Do you feel that you are going to be able to maintain taking care of yourself? Is it psychologically safe? Are there questions that you can be asking around things that would support that, right? And interestingly enough, I think during this time, while many companies are still managing the pandemic, we're able to kind of see that live, whether you're checking it out on Glassdoor and listening to other employee comments, or you might just be reading what they're doing in how they've engaged you in being considerate of, for example, background noise or where you are at home in taking a virtual interview. Take that opportunity to check on the extent to which the environment is going to be one that doesn't take you down a rat hole where you are further sacrificing yourself or needing to be ultra strong. So find ways that you can ask those questions and peek under the hood before you step into an environment that wouldn't be psychologically safe. So thank you so much, Lorraine. That was an excellent point.
Yes, and you have some additional comments in here around Angela's trying to understand strengths and focusing on them to, help others find and share their superpowers, which I love.
Yes, yeah. It's again a great action. How could you create an opportunity for someone else in your ability to kind of balance where, how you're taking care of yourself? So your strengths should be the things that hopefully come easy to you. But one way not to overburden yourself with the things that come harder are thinking about those as opportunities, right? There's someone you can invite to the table. So excellent point.
I love that. And Lysandra points out that she's going to work on not scheduling every moment of the day, which is hard in this new Zoom reality. So for those of us who are in corporate, it seems like every second of the day is scheduled. And then when you get off the Zoom calls, you're further busy with things around the house or in your life. So it is good to just set aside some nothing time.
Yes. Yeah. So it's interesting. It's you had mentioned boundaries earlier, and I think it connects to this in terms of how we schedule ourselves, right? So I know in my past, and it's probably still today, the masters of my calendar, myself, but also the folks that I support. So I found a way that although I can say yes to taking a meeting with someone, I only give 30 minutes unless there really is a reason to go broader. Or I'm working with a company right now in Seattle. They have a great package, a practice of only having 50-minute meetings, allowing for at least a 5-minute to 10-minute breather between the start and stop of another meeting. You can establish that for yourself. You don't have to wait for your company to jump in on that. And also scheduling thinking time. I'm usually mindful of when I'm getting ready for a presentation like we have today, or times where I'm, preparing for a project. I need to block hours on my calendar, and I actually block it to hopefully, kind of save that space for what allows me then to show up more in a good way and hopefully be successful in what I'm sharing. But I hope everyone's doing that, right? I put my breakfast time in. If it's just a minute to check emails before I get into the day of meetings, take those opportunities where you can and keep it within a boundary, right? What are the hours that are reasonable for you to balance the many hats that you have?
Yes, I love that advice, Makeda, about blocking your calendar. And I sometimes even put myself out of office if I.
Yes. I do that on many of the chat features. So sorry for those of you who know me.
We won't tell. We won't tell anybody. Don't tell on us, y'all. We're but
it's not really here.
You got to protect your mental space any way you can.
Absolutely, for sure. Absolutely.
Yeah, other great comments saying yes too often and too fast. That's another one that is hard to avoid. Especially if you're a people pleaser. I'm a recovering people pleaser, so so it is hard to stop yourself. You have to be conscious and not say yes too soon, so that you're not eating up your time.
Yeah, I mean, even adopting the concept of yes and, right? Yes, do it, but the and says you have an opportunity to put some boundaries around it or some conditions around it that still allow you to thrive, right? So you're not necessarily dealing with a lot of sacrifice in that respect.
Love it. Yeah, just lots of great praise for your tips, Makeda. You're bringing some excellent tips here for folks that are really resonating.
Awesome. So glad everyone took an opportunity to kind of think about something you can do. I am so appreciative of the time that we've spent together. I'm going to turn it back to Regina just for a few closing remarks, but please, I'd love to stay in touch with you. So please follow me on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Hopefully we'll continue to support each other. And if I can keep you honest on making sure that you're not sacrificing too much or bearing with the cost of that, please do reach out. So, Regina, I'll hand it back to you.
Thank you, Makeda. And what a wonderful talk today. I know I personally took so much away from your wonderful tips, and our audience did too. So thank you for sharing with us. So before we let you all go, I wanted to invite you all to continue to follow CARE as a collective, so you can sign up to join our LinkedIn group, follow us on Facebook. Be sure to sign up for our next series, which I'll talk about here in a second, our next session of the series on Eventbrite. And of course, you can always find the video of this and the previous sessions we held on YouTube. So please do continue to check in. And we are so excited for our last and final session of this series. We are going to have Milka Esdale talk to us about living your best life through your values. So Milka is an outstanding executive coach that is going to be doing the last but not least session of our summer series, Your Voice Matters, next Wednesday, same time here on YouTube Live. So we can't wait to see you all back. Thank you again for joining us today. And thank you, Makeda, for sharing. Wonderful job.
Thank you so much, everyone. Hope you have a great rest of day. And we look forward to seeing you next week.
Bye. Take care.
Bye, everyone.